Today we want to talk about being a church that sees, really sees children, sees the possibility of their spiritual formation. Now, seeing seems like one of those kind of obvious things, yet we know that sometimes we can see things really different from the people around us, even if they're just like us. Think about some of the internet memes that have gone around that are kind of visual puzzles. Remember this one? #TheDress. The big question is, as you look at this dress, do you see a dress that is white and gold, or do you see a dress that is blue and black? Now, probably when you first saw it, you saw it one way or the other, and you probably, as you're looking at it harder, couldn't possibly see how anyone could look at it any differently. Yet this particular image, it got shared like tens of millions of times, generated hundreds of millions of comments from people and arguments and discussions. How in the world can we see one thing in two radically different ways? Believe it or not, the actual color of that dress is black and blue. But looking at that picture, you can see it two different ways depending on how your eyes are wired to perceive color. And it's really hard to see it any other way. Crazy. Here's another one. Remember this one? Are these oily, shiny legs? Or are these legs that just have white paint ingeniously applied to them? It's just white paint, but the first time that you see it, you're likely to see very oily or shiny legs because it's a trick that our eyes play us. Now these are visual puzzles, but what about people that intentionally try to, affect the way that we perceive things? One of my favorite artists is Dudolph, and he basically creates these visual puzzles to try and see if we can find things that are hidden in them. Here's a picture of a bunch of snowmen. Okay, now looking at that field of snowmen, can you find the one panda in the picture? You'll notice that a lot of those snowmen are different from one another, but there's only one panda. Do you see it? It's right there. Put a red circle around it. Our children sometimes can get lost in the crowd and lost in society. And that's why it's important that we become a church that sees. The more that I look at Dudolph's artwork, the more I learn little tricks and techniques and ways of looking at them that help me find the things that he's hidden in his pictures. And today we want to talk about seeing in such a way that maybe we will see some things that we haven't before when it comes to the children in our churches. Today's children need a seeing church, probably more than ever. I think children today are asking the question when they go to church and just about any environment that they're in. Children are asking, do you see me? Maybe you remember a time when you were a child when you felt invisible or you felt that nobody paid attention to you. I remember a specific incident I had when I was growing up. When I was very young, my mom had just given birth to twin boys. And I really loved my brothers, but they were born on Christmas Eve. And so they kind of stole the Christmas show. Every single year, they were cute, they had blonde hair, everybody thought they were great to look at and play with, and when they were like 2 or 3, I remember on a particular Christmas, everybody was focused on it being their birthday, and I was feeling neglected. So I decided that I was going to disappear and see if anybody noticed. So I climbed underneath a coffee table that had a long tablecloth on it, and I got underneath that and I just waited. It was in between 2 chairs and a couch. So eventually people came and sat down as they were visiting and eating some of their cake and ice cream, and they were talking and they were visiting, but nobody was saying anything about me. Nobody knew that I was gone. I was starting to get really hot and cramped under there, so I was curled up in a little ball, starting to sweat. And finally, one of my grandmothers said, "Hey, has anyone seen Mark?" And somebody said, "Oh yeah, I saw him in the other room. He's probably eating cake." The problem was I had been under that table for an incredibly long time. Now I thought I'd been under there for hours. Probably in my elementary school mind, it was probably only, maybe 20, 30 minutes. But it seemed like an eternity that I'd been on that table. And when they said that they thought they'd seen me in the other room and I was probably eating cake and ice cream and I was underneath that table, I had had it. So I burst out from underneath the table, scaring everybody in the room, cake and ice cream flying everywhere. And I said, "Aha! I've been under that table the whole time and you didn't even know I was gone." I'd finally been seen, as everybody was laughing at me, maybe for the wrong reasons. But I think this generation is wanting to know from the church, do you see me? Do you care enough to really see me? That's what we want to talk about today. A seeing church understands that this generation of children needs a church family like no other generation before them. You know, it used to be in our country that we knew everybody in our communities. We knew our neighbors. We knew the teachers that educated our kids. We knew the mayor. We knew the police officers that patrolled our streets. We kind of knew everybody. And while there's still some places like that in America that have knowledge of everyone that makes up their little ecosystem, a lot of us don't even know the neighbors that live right next door to us. That's the kind of disconnected, connected world that we live in. While the internet has made it possible for us to connect to everybody, people are feeling more lonely and isolated than ever. And as we come out of this time of a pandemic, we know that we have a generation that needs to be seen. As people talk about the importance of kids getting back in school, they know that it's not just about education, but it's about them being seen by people in their community. Because there are children that are being neglected. There are children that are being abused. And it's that community of people that see them each and every day in the worlds that they're living that come in and intervene and help. And we need to be a church that sees people today. A seeing church knows more than a child's name. They know that child's story. Think about that for a moment. You know, we do pick up the stories of children, but usually it kind of happens along the way as we're just in the course of doing our ministry and interacting with them. We come to learn things. But what if we made this an intentional thing? What if we said, you know what, in the first 1 to 2 months of reconvening this fall, we want to try and know not just the names of these children, but we want to know their stories. We want to know about each and every one of their families. We want to know something that they love to do with their time, something they're really good at. We want to learn about challenges that they might be facing in their life. We want to know all the names of their family members. We want to know how they came to be a part of our church. You know, what if we did that? What if we were intentional in knowing the stories behind all of the children who attended our church? I'll tell you what would happen. We would have a generation of children who felt seen by the church. We need to be a church that sees. Another thing about a seeing church is a seeing church fills in the gaps. You see, when we know the stories of children, we can be there to kind of stand in the gap for them and things that may not be happening for them in their lives. There are some children that have potential that their parents don't see. We have the ability to point that out. There are children who are hungry that come into our church every single week and don't have access to daily nutrition. We have the ability to see that and fill in the gaps and take care of that for them. I know as a child growing up, I had lots of interesting hobbies that I wanted to do at a very young age. I remember being really interested in photography. And I remember one of the older men in my church who was a photographer seeing that. And he stood in the gap with his expertise and invited me to come and follow him as he took pictures and to come in and see how he developed film and prints in his darkroom back then in those day and age. And it was great and it was wonderful. And I remember sitting there thinking, I am seen as a child in this church. I remember being asked to do special projects at the church from time to time in areas that I was good at. And I remember thinking, the church sees me. They know who I am. We have the ability to stand in the gap for those kids. Now, there's things like nutrition and things like that, but what about things like learning opportunities? You know, with school going virtual in some of our communities and going back to part-time and different configurations, how are we coming in and tutoring children? One of the things that happened in New York City is that a lot of art education got cut from public schools because there just wasn't enough money to spend on it. And some members of the church said, you know, this isn't right. It's our creativity that sets us apart from all of the other created things that God made. It's the image of God in us that inspires us to create and express ourselves through the arts. So the church, without any strings attached, came alongside schools to provide art education. And Thrive Collective exists to this day, continuing to help provide those missing gaps in the lives of children. A Seeing Church also helps parents grasp their children's spiritual potential. Now, we all believe that parents have the best opportunity to help their children follow in the way of Jesus. Yet not every parent is capable of doing that work. I once heard a speaker say, you know, you can outsource your child's athletics, you can outsource your child's music lessons, you can outsource your child's education, but you can't outsource their spiritual formation. And I want to tell you something. I kind of thought, well, why not? If somebody could help my kids grow in the way of Jesus better than me, wouldn't I be stupid not to let that person do it? And that's what the church is supposed to do, right? We're supposed to help do all of that work. But one of the problems that parents have is that some of them have never been discipled themselves. So they don't know how to make a disciple because they were never discipled. How can we come alongside moms and dads because they are positioned to be the best disciplers of their children and to help them spiritually grow? How can we help cast a vision in their lives and give them tools and resources to equip them to see those opportunities play out in the lives of their kids? That's what a Seeing Church does. So we've been talking about all of these things, but there's one other thing that a Seeing Church does that I want to focus on, and that is this. A Seeing Church prays regularly for every child in the church and the surrounding neighborhood. I said surrounding neighborhood because it's not just the kids who walk through our door that need our prayers. It's the ones in the neighborhood around us. They need to be seen by us too. And I know it sounds really obvious that we would pray for the children in our programs, yet I've seen over and over and over again over the last 30 years of full-time ministry that that's one of the things that is often neglected. We don't spend time praying name by name, story by story, for the gaps in each of their lives. And as we become a Seeing Church that does all of those things, we can pray richly and robustly for the needs of those children. And when we pray for them, we see them more. And we see them together with God. And God shows us how He sees them. And we can be a Seeing Church. We're going to talk more about this, and a little bit later I'm going to come back and I'm going to share 3 lenses that can help us see opportunities in our churches to reach the children in our communities.